Well, welcome to this week's R3. This week we wrap up our series, The Blessed Life. We've been learning from Pastor Robert Morris at Gateway Church on this concept of generosity, and hopefully this series has been as eye-opening to you as it was to me. But today is where the rubber meets the road. In the first week of this series, we talked about it's all about the heart, and that was all about our motivation. Then we gave you some principles the last 2 weeks, the principle of first and the principle of multiplication. But all of this is just information unless we choose to apply it. And when we talk about applying it, in order to apply this to our lives, we have to do something called breaking the spirit of mammon. And you might say, what in the world is mammon? To discover that, let's look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. And it says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate the one and love the other. You will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money," or in many translations, it says God and mammon. Mammon is the Aramaic word for riches, and not just riches and money, but confidence in our riches, confidence in our money. In other words, Jesus says, you can have confidence in money, or you can have confidence in me, but you can't have both. Now, this is where it gets real. You get to choose who you're going to serve. If you choose to serve Jesus, then you will apply these principles to your giving. If you choose not to serve Jesus, if you choose money instead, then you won't. It's just that simple. We have to break this spirit of mammon in our lives. And in order to do so, Sunday we looked at 3 principles. First, we need to break the rulership of mammon. Serve here literally is translated to be a slave of. You see, you can have 2 employers. You can have 2 jobs. That's totally possible. But you cannot have 2 owners. This is not asking you who you work for. This is asking you who your master is. You see, mammon is a spirit that particularly rests upon money. What we don't often understand is that every dollar that exists on this earth, there is a spirit upon it. Either the spirit of mammon rests upon it or the spirit of God rests upon it, and those are our only 2 options. Now, when we choose to tithe, when we choose to be generous, God brings His blessing on the rest of our money. The Spirit of God rests upon it. But the flip side is also true. When we choose to not tithe, when we choose to not honor God in that way, the spirit of mammon rests upon our finances. You've heard the phrase, money talks. Well, money doesn't, but mammon does. And when it talks, it promises things that it simply can't deliver. Happiness, fulfillment, identity. You see, mammon tries to replace God with things. It doesn't matter how much more we get, we'll never have enough. This is why Jesus says we can't serve both, because God and mammon are actually opposed to each other. When we make riches our purpose, our priority, when we see riches as our source of power, then mammon is on the throne of our lives. The problem is that God doesn't share His throne. When we say with our lips, Jesus is my Lord, He is my master, but we live in a way that's contrary to that, our actions speak louder than our words. It may be hard for you to go, well, where is my heart? But think about it this way. When you come to a fork in the road and God is calling you one way and mammon is calling you the other, which way are you going to choose? That's what God is doing with this tithe, with this call to generosity. He's putting a fork in the road and you have to make a choice. Either you will serve God or you will serve mammon. Number 2, conquer the lie of coveting. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9 and 10 says, "But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows." You see, coveting isn't about what you have. Coveting is about what you want that you don't have. Money is not the root of evil. The love of money is. And when we choose mammon, when we choose self-sufficiency, we're saying, I can do this on my own. I don't need help. We make mammon our master. A.W. Tozer, in his book, The Pursuit of God, says this: "There is within the human heart a tough, fibrous root of fallen life whose nature is to possess, always to possess. It covets things with a deep and fierce passion. The pronouns my and mine look innocent enough in print, but their constant and universal use is significant. They are verbal symptoms of our deep disease, The roots of our hearts have grown down into things, and we dare not pull up one rootlet lest we die. Things have become necessary to us, a development never originally intended. God's gifts now take the place of God, and the whole course of nature is upset by the monstrous substitution. Did you hear that phrase? Monstrous substitution? When we take God off of the throne of our lives and we put Mammon on the throne, that choice is a monstrous mistake. And the only way to defeat the spirit in our lives is by giving. When God calls us to generosity, when He calls us to tithe, when He calls us to give generously, He is not doing it to hold us captive. He's actually doing it to set us free. You are to be a good steward of what you have. In Luke chapter 16, verse 9 through 13, it says, "Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? And if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? No one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So let me ask you, how are you using what you've been given? Think about it this way. The people around you right now, the people in your life group, the people at your church, the people at your work, the people you live with in community, your neighbors, your friends, they are the only eternal riches. They're the only treasure. I mean, think about the thing that you own that you treasure the most. Think about the thing that you spent the most money on. Someday it will be gone. It will fade away. But souls last for eternity. And that's why we give. Robert Morris puts it this way: heaven is being populated and hell is being plundered by our offerings. That's what I want you to wrestle with tonight in R3. Where is God calling me to stretch my faith when it comes to generosity? Because that's what this series is all about. It's time to break the spirit of mammon in our lives, our church, and our culture. So wrestle with this question, and then we'll jump in with Reflect.
So we've established that around the idea of our resources is really a spiritual issue. We've unpacked that throughout the course of this series, and it really kind of came to a head this week as we talked about the spirit of mammon. We talked about how there's this spirit of mammon that's over our resources until we invite God's spirit to reign over those areas of our life. Now, the pastor that we've been hearing from the past couple weeks, Pastor Robert Morris, also wrote a book called The Blessed Life to address some of these issues. And in his book, he goes into a little bit more detail about some other spirits that kind of keep company with the spirit of mammon. He identifies them as the spirit of pride and the spirit of poverty. And they work together with the spirit of mammon to draw our attention away from God and onto our resources as the things around us. Let's walk into those for a little bit. The spirit of pride, I think, is the easier of the two to see. The spirit of pride around our resources, around our money, says this, that all that we have is a result of our hard work. The spirit of pride says that work is what gets what we have in this life. It turns our attention away from God as the giver and onto us as the provider who works to sustain ourselves in the world. The spirit of poverty is a bit harder to see. Often it masquerades itself as a godly idea by causing us to be humble and not to draw attention to ourselves. Where pride draws attention to the resources, poverty seems to dismantle the things that God has given us, to undermine them, to say that they're worth less than they actually are. The spirit of poverty will say that wealth is all from the devil, that it's not godly at all to have any kind of resources or material blessings, when, as we've heard in these past couple weeks, that's simply not true. So you can see how both of these spirits, working in tandem with the spirit of Mammon, create a tug and pull on our life, especially as it comes to the area of our finances. Pride says that this is all a result of our hard work and we've earned it on our own. Poverty says that we don't deserve anything, and it shuns any blessing and any gift God might want to use to bless us. Meanwhile, God is over all and above all and through all, and He is the giver and draws attention to Himself through those actions. So what's the correct response? The answer is relatively simple. It's gratitude, thankfulness, right? Hopefully easy to come by in this season. See, gratitude and thankfulness draw our attention back to God as the giver and draws our attention away from things around us. When we don't focus on the things, that disables the power of the spirit of pride and the spirit of poverty and the spirit of Mammon in our lives. It properly recognizes God as the giver, and it gives thanks to Him for all that He's given us. What's a practical example of what this could look like? It can be as simple as a compliment, right? Hey, that's a nice shirt. Pride may say, I know, it's imported. I got it from the cities. You won't find anything like this around here. Poverty may say, really, this old thing? I got it for half price. I found it at the bottom of an old used pile of clothes that I haven't seen for a while. It's really not much. Gratitude and thankfulness simply say thanks and then give blessing to God for the gifts in our lives. Gratitude and thankfulness goes a long way to dismantle the spiritual curse that can be on our resources and finances. So as you go into this week with family and friends, and as you discuss tonight, I simply want you to reflect on the question, what are you thankful for? And allow that to permeate your conversation, your thoughts, and your spirits as you go on through this week. I hope you have a great discussion.